The metallic taste fills her mouth as teeth meet flesh. Around the stone circle, witnesses stand in perfect silence, their torchlight casting dancing shadows against ancient monoliths. The young woman doesn't hesitate. This is what transformation demands. Her mother's body lies still on the cold altar, steam rising from carefully placed incisions. Each organ grants its own power: the heart for courage, the liver for resilience, the brain for wisdom. The drums beat in rhythm with her swallowing. This is Cinderella's first incarnation. 5. Not a girl in rags waiting for rescue, but an active participant in the oldest magic known to humanity. The chanting rises as she consumes what was offered willingly. Her mother's final gift, the ultimate sacrifice for social elevation. No fairy godmother here, no pumpkin carriages. Just the primal understanding that to become something greater, you must first devour what came before. The witnesses nod their approval. The ritual nears completion. Soon she will emerge, transformed, carrying her mother's strength within her own body. This is how the story began, in prehistoric darkness, with communities who understood that power transfer required physical consumption. Every version that followed, Italian, French, German, Celtic, would try to hide this original horror, but the truth pulses beneath each retelling. How did humanity's most beloved princess story begin with ritual cannibalism? How did we journey from sacred consumption at stone altars to animated movies where mice sing cheerful songs? To understand why little girls dream of being Cinderella, we must first confront what their ancestors did to become her. We must trace the blood-soaked path from prehistoric transformation rituals through Renaissance murder plots, from Versailles political intrigue to Germanic mutilation ceremonies. The truth about Cinderella will forever change how you see every transformation story, including your own. The drums stopped. In the flickering torchlight, the girl's mother lay still on the altar, steam rising from the precise incision across her chest. This scene, reconstructed from Celtic oral traditions passed down through millennia, represents humanity's first Cinderella story. Long before writing existed, communities gathered at stone circles during specific lunar phases to witness the ultimate transformation ritual. The protagonist wasn't a passive victim awaiting rescue, in ESO. She was an active participant in sacred cannibalism, designed to transfer power from one generation to the next. The systematic consumption followed strict protocols. The heart came first, still warm, granting courage for the trials ahead. The brain followed, carrying accumulated wisdom and memories. The hands consumed last, transferred skills, weaving, healing, leadership. Archaeological evidence from Neolithic sites across Europe reveals ceremonial blade marks on human bones concentrated around these specific body parts. The cuts show precision, reverence, purpose. But the worst part wasn't the eating itself. The worst part was the community requirement. Every member of the circle had to witness, had to approve, had to carry the secret. Children as young as 7 stood in the outer ring, learning that transformation demanded witnesses. The drums would not resume until every observer nodded their acceptance. Refusal meant exile, or worse. The girl chewing her mother's flesh wasn't committing murder. Her mother had volunteered, trained her daughter for months in the proper techniques. This was love in its most primal form, literally giving yourself to ensure your child's elevation. The preparation took years. Mothers would mark their daughters' faces with specific symbols, teaching them which organs granted which powers. They practiced on animals first, learning to overcome natural revulsion. What archaeologists found next to the bones changed everything about our understanding of these rituals. Clay tablets, predating written language, showed pictographic instructions. The images depicted not just the consumption, but the transformation itself, the daughter's features shifting to echo her mother's, their spirits merging. These weren't mere cannibals, they were practitioners of the first magic, becoming someone else by consuming them. The lunar phase mattered intensely. New moons for beauty transformations, full moons for power transfers, the waning crescent, most dangerous of all, for absorbing enemies' strengths. Each phase required different preparations, different witnesses, different prices. The stone circles weren't randomly placed. They aligned with celestial movements, creating optimal conditions for transformation. But why did communities permit this, even encourage it? Because it worked. The daughters who consumed their mothers did transform. They emerged from the circles changed, more confident, more skilled, more powerful. Whether through psychological integration or something deeper, the ritual created new beings from the merging of two. The price for refusing the ritual was worse than death. Those who balked at the final moment, who couldn't complete the consumption, became outcasts, neither their old selves nor their new ones. They wandered between communities, belonging nowhere, transformed into living warnings about the danger of incomplete metamorphosis. These prehistoric communities understood something we've forgotten. Transformation is violent. It requires destroying what was to create what will be. Modern Cinderella stories hide this truth behind sparkles and magic wands, but the original message remains. To become the princess, the servant girl must die. And in those torchlit circles, she died in the most literal way possible, devoured by her own daughter, who would carry her forward into a new identity. Little did these prehistoric communities know, their cannibalistic transformation ritual would evolve into something even more disturbing, a blueprint for social murder that would sweep through Renaissance Italy, where Cinderella would learn to kill with style. The heavy oak trunk lid hung perfectly balanced. Zazzola had measured the angle 17 times. In 1634, Italian author Giambattista Basile gave us Zazzola, the Cinderella who murdered her way to success. His version, La Gatta Cenerentola, strips away prehistoric spirituality and replaces it with calculated assassination. This Cinderella doesn't consume her mother. She orchestrates her stepmother's death with Renaissance precision. The murder plot unfolds with mechanical brilliance. Zazzola convinces her stepmother to check inside a large wooden trunk, claiming to search for wedding linens. The lid, weighted with hidden stones, waits to snap shut. Zazzola knows exactly where to stand, exactly when to accidentally bump the supporting stick. The crack of vertebrae echoes through the chamber as the lid crushes the older woman's neck. But Zazzola's notebooks revealed something darker than simple murder. Pages of calculations fill her private journals, angles of impact, force equations, practice runs with melons, approximating human skulls. She spent months preparing, studying her stepmother's daily routines, identifying the perfect moment when servants would be elsewhere, when screams might go unheard. The self-injury component adds layers of premeditation. Before triggering the trunk, Zazzola slams her own hand in a drawer, leaving visible bruises. She practices her shocked screams, her devastated collapse. When servants finally arrive, they find a hysterical girl with injuries consistent with trying to save her stepmother. The community accepts the accident narrative, because the alternative, that sweet Zazzola planned everything, proves too disturbing to contemplate. Social advancement through elimination became Renaissance Italy's open secret. Noble families understood that limited positions meant someone had to die for someone else to rise. Zazzola's story wasn't fantasy, it was instruction manual. Basile wrote for audiences who recognized every trick, every alibi, every calculated tear. Her self-inflicted wound served a purpose no one suspected at the time. The bruising on her hand matched defensive wounds, yes, but the pattern told a different story to those who knew how to read it. The marks formed a specific design, a signal to potential allies that she was available for hire. Other noble families began approaching her father with marriage proposals, recognizing a valuable asset in a girl who could eliminate obstacles so efficiently. The Italian version includes 6 subsequent murders. Zazzola doesn't stop with one stepmother. Each replacement meets mysterious accidents, falls from balconies, food poisoning at precise moments, tragic encounters with runaway horses. The community maintains willful blindness. Better to pretend coincidence than acknowledge they're harboring a serial killer who targets maternal figures. What makes Basile's version particularly chilling is Zazzola's emotional coldness. She doesn't consume her victims like her prehistoric ancestors. She simply removes them. No ritual significance, no spiritual transformation, just practical elimination of competition. She journals about each death like a merchant tracking inventory. Emotion appears only in her public performances of grief. The prince in this version knows exactly who he's choosing. The slipper test isn't about finding mystery woman, prom. It's about confirming which killer he wants to marry. Royal families needed someone capable of court intrigue, of eliminating rivals without detection. Zazzola's reputation precedes her. The prince doesn't seek innocence, he seeks competence in murder. But Zazzola's notebooks contained one final revelation. Her last entry, written after marrying the prince, outlines plans for his elimination. Having learned that transformation requires consuming or destroying what came before, she prepares to transcend even royalty. The princess phase was just another stepping stone. The notebook ends mid-sentence, historical record unclear whether she succeeded or finally met someone more skilled in elimination than herself. Basile understood what prehistoric communities knew. Ras, transformation demands violence. He simply updated it for Renaissance sensibilities. No sacred rituals here, just pure ambition weaponized. And his audience loved it, saw themselves in Zozzola's calculated advancement, perhaps even took notes of their own. As Italian princesses perfected murder as social strategy, French courtiers at Versailles developed something subtler and infinitely more dangerous. They would transform Cinderella from killer to psychological warrior. At Versailles, a misplaced curtsy could mean death, and Perrault watched it happen weekly. Charles Perrault published his Cinderella in 1697, writing from inside the most dangerous court in Europe. His version replaced Italian murder with French psychological warfare, transforming Cinderella into a master manipulator navigating deadly social currents. The glass slipper wasn't about romance. It was a test of who could maintain impossible standards without shattering. Versailles operated on rules written in blood but spoken in whispers. A laugh at the wrong moment meant exile. Wearing colours that accidentally matched the king's mistress meant social death. Perrault watched courtiers destroy each other with nothing more than strategic fan movements and precisely timed yawns. His Cinderella had to be smarter, subtler, more psychologically astute than any Italian killer. The Duchess who inspired Cinderella's stepmother met a fate worse than fiction. Historical records show she made one error. She smiled when the Queen frowned during a musical performance. Within 6 months, orchestrated rumours destroyed her reputation. Her husband discovered manufactured evidence of affairs. Her children were sent to convents, and she died in poverty, officially of fever but likely of poison, all for a mistimed smile. Perrault's Cinderella survives through calculated passivity that masks hypervigilance. She absorbs abuse not from weakness but from strategy, understanding that visible suffering earns invisible allies. Every tear is calculated for witness impact. Every moment of kindness to servants builds a network of information gatherers. She practices mysterious smiles in mirrors, knowing that at Versailles, being unreadable meant being dangerous. The fairy godmother represents not magic, but the shadow network of former courtiers who survived by helping others navigate palace intrigue. These retired ladies maintained vast intelligence operations, trading information for favors, teaching young women the codes that meant life or death. The transformation scene isn't supernatural. It's preparation for performance. Learning to walk in impossible shoes without showing pain, to dance while calculating political implications of every partner. Perrault encoded a warning that saved 3 courtiers' lives. In his original manuscript, he used specific phrases that matched contemporary court gossip, warning about a planned poisoning at an upcoming ball. 3 young women suddenly developed illnesses that prevented attendance. The poisoner, frustrated, made errors that led to exposure. Perrault's fairy tale was also intelligence bulletin for those who could decode it. The glass slipper's true purpose would horrify modern readers. At Versailles, women wore impossible fashions to prove they didn't need to work, that they had servants for every task. Glass shoes meant you couldn't run, couldn't defend yourself, required constant assistance. Wearing them successfully showed you commanded enough loyalty that others would protect you. The prince seeks not the foot that fits, but the woman who can walk in transparent vulnerability while maintaining perfect control. Perrault's stepsisters represent actual court rivals. He watched destroy each other. Their foot mutilation isn't physical, with social. They contort themselves into impossible positions, sacrifice authenticity for acceptance, bleed internally from constant performance pressure. When they fail the slipper test, it's because they've already deformed themselves beyond recognition trying to fit court standards. The midnight deadline encoded Versailles' brutal reality. Transformation was always temporary. Court favor lasted exactly as long as performance maintained perfection. One stumble, one moment of dropping the mask, and exile followed. Courtiers lived in constant fear of their midnight when protection ended and true selves emerged. Cinderella's flight wasn't from magic ending, but from recognizing the precise moment when political winds shifted. Strategic kindness became weapon and shield. Cinderella's forgiveness of her stepsisters demonstrated power. Only the strong could afford mercy. But Perrault's original included a darker detail. She forgave them publicly, while privately ensuring they remained dependent on her charity, neutralized as threats. Versailles taught that enemies kept close and grateful were safer than enemies destroyed. The prince himself embodied court danger. His search for the mystery woman wasn't romantic but political. He needed to identify who possessed such masterful control over court navigation. A woman who could appear, dominate, then vanish without leaving traceable connections represented either the ultimate ally or the deadliest threat. The slipper test determined which. While French nobles danced in glass slippers, Germanic forests echoed with screams as the brothers Grimm collected testimonies of supernatural justice that would transform Cinderella once again. The kitchen knife scraped against bone as the eldest sister sawed through her own toe. When the brothers Grimm collected their version in 1812, they discovered a Cinderella stripped of French sophistication and Italian calculation. Their informants, rural German women who'd inherited oral traditions, spoke of blood justice and self-mutilation as the price of social advancement. This Cinderella emerged from a world where transformation demanded visible sacrifice. The German forests held communities that believed in immediate, violent justice. Unlike Versailles' subtle poisonings or Italy's orchestrated accidents, Germanic tradition favored public spectacle. The Grimm brothers interviewed witnesses who swore they'd seen ravens pluck out eyes, trees grow from graves, and blood speak truths that humans tried to hide. Their Cinderella existed in this world of literal supernatural intervention. What the ravens saw with their supernatural sight went beyond simple detection of blood in the slipper. Germanic folklore granted these birds ability to perceive soul damage, to see where ambition had rotted character from inside. The stepsister's mutilation was merely physical manifestation of spiritual self-destruction already complete. Ravens circled those who'd traded humanity for advancement, marking them for community recognition. The self-mutilation scene carries deeper significance than mere desperation. In Germanic tradition, blood sacrifice opened doorways to power. The sisters understood this. They weren't just trying to fit a shoe, but attempting to pay the traditional price for transformation. Their error lay not in the attempt, but in offering corrupted payment. Blood given in deception held no power, brought only punishment. The prince's reaction to the blood-filled slipper revealed the Germanic understanding of authority. A true leader recognized deception instantly. Blood spoke to royal blood. The prince's initial blindness suggested either weak bloodline or willful ignorance, R4D, both dangerous in a ruler. Only when ravens literally screamed truth could he act, showing he needed supernatural intervention to perform basic leadership functions. Community celebration of violence served specific purpose. When ravens pecked out the stepsister's eyes at Cinderella's wedding, guests cheered not from cruelty, but from relief. Germanic communities lived in constant fear of hidden corruption, of members who'd made deals with dark forces. Public punishment reassured everyone that justice still functioned, that betrayal brought consequences, that the community could identify and eliminate threats. The wedding guests' applause meant something terrifying to modern sensibilities, but logical to Germanic worldview. They celebrated restoration of natural order through violence. The stepsisters had attempted to cheat fundamental laws, RAS, trying to claim rewards meant for another, offering false sacrifice, deceiving royalty. Their blinding restored balance prevented them from ever attempting such deception again. Blood, as truth revealer, went beyond fairy tale metaphor. Germanic communities practiced forms of trial by ordeal where blood played central role. The way blood flowed, its color, its reaction to sacred objects, all carried meaning. The slipper filling with blood wasn't unfortunate side effect but active revelation. The shoe itself judged worthiness, rejected false claimants through blood evidence. The Grimm version includes detail often sanitized. Cinderella watches the mutilations and blindings without intervening. She neither protests nor celebrates, maintaining perfect neutrality while violence unfolds around her. This positions her as agent of fate rather than victim or victor. Harema. She simply exists while cosmic justice operates through her presence. Germanic tradition recognized such individuals as touched by destiny, dangerous to oppose or assist. The forest itself participates in justice. Trees grow from the mother's grave. Birds carry messages. Even the hearth ashes that give Cinderella her name hold transformative power. Nature actively involves itself in human transformation, judging worthiness, enabling elevation, punishing transgression. The prince doesn't find Cinderella. The forest delivers her, marked as chosen. But beneath the blood and mutilation lay deeper horror. The stepsisters knew the price and paid it willingly. They understood that in their world, transformation required sacrifice of flesh, that social elevation demanded physical payment. Their only mistake was trying to pay with deception rather than honest offering. Had they openly sacrificed, genuinely given their flesh to transformation, Germanic tradition suggests they might have succeeded. As German sisters bled for status, Irish maidens signed contracts with entities that would haunt their bloodlines for centuries, adding yet another layer to Cinderella's dark evolution. The ink moved across the parchment like living things, terms shifting whenever she blinked. Celtic Cinderella variants, collected from Irish and Scottish oral traditions, introduced supernatural contracts that transformed the story into generational horror. Here, transformation wasn't achieved through cannibalism, murder, or mutilation, but through legally binding agreements with the Sidhe, the fairy folk who operated like supernatural loan sharks with eternity to collect. The Sidhe offered what humans couldn't: immediate transformation, perfect beauty, irresistible charm. But their contracts contained clauses written in languages that predated human speech, terms that shifted meaning across dimensions. A maiden might sign for beauty lasting until true love's kiss, only to discover the Sidhe defined true love as something impossible for mortals to achieve. Irish storytellers warned of specific contract tricks. Your firstborn didn't mean your child. It meant the first thing you created after signing, which could be a thought, a breath, a moment of joy. Service for a year and a day, operated on otherworld time, where minutes stretched to decades. Beauty unmarred by sorrow meant inability to feel grief, even when watching loved ones die. The contract's hidden clause activated 50 years later, when the original signer's granddaughter reached 16. Suddenly, she discovered she couldn't cross running water, couldn't touch iron, couldn't enter churches. The debt had passed down, accumulating interest. Each generation found new restrictions, new payments due, until entire bloodlines lived circumscribed by supernatural legislation they'd never signed. Celtic Cinderella gained her transformation not through personal sacrifice but by mortgaging her descendants' freedom. The glass slippers were crystal shoes from otherworld forges that let her dance on air but bound her feet to fairy paths. Her dress woven from moonbeams looked magnificent but marked her as Sidhe property to those with sight to see. The prince himself might be fairy-touched, drawn to her because otherworld contracts demanded it. The Sidhe's true agenda emerged only after 3 generations, when patterns became clear. They didn't want individual souls, they wanted bloodlines. Each contract created hybrid families, part human, part other, children who could walk between worlds. These descendants served as bridges, allowing Sidhe influence to seep into human realm. What seemed like individual transformation was actually species modification. Scottish variants included protection clauses learned through bitter experience. Wise women taught girls to sign only with their childhood names, which held no legal power after womanhood. They wore iron jewellery to court balls, knowing Sidhe couldn't maintain glamours near ferrous metals. They carried bread in their pockets, as accepting fairy food created unbreakable bonds. But protection came with price. Those who successfully navigated fairy contracts without entrapment found themselves marked as clever, and therefore dangerous. The Sidhe remembered across centuries, waiting for bloodlines to produce someone vulnerable, someone desperate enough to sign without reading carefully. Cinderella's descendants might live free for generations before one bad harvest, one cruel stepmother, drove a girl to sign her bloodline back into bondage. Her great-granddaughter discovered why she couldn't cross running water when she tried to elope. At the bridge, her feet simply stopped, muscles locked by contract terms she'd never seen. Her lover watched her age decades in minutes as fairy debt collected. She survived, but changed. Part of her remained at that bridge forever, payment for an ancestor's ambition. The transformation itself in Celtic versions happened instantly but incompletely. Cinderella became beautiful, charming, graceful, but something essential got edited out. Witnesses described her as perfect but empty, like a masterful painting of a person rather than a person herself. The Sidhe took their payment from her humanity itself, leaving a gorgeous shell that performed personhood without truly feeling it. Celtic warnings emphasized that fairy contracts never truly ended. Even death didn't break them. They followed souls into afterlife, attached to reincarnations, waited in bloodlines for activation. A contract signed in desperation for one ball's transformation could haunt a family for millennia. The glass slipper wasn't proof of identity but mark of ownership, fairy brand that claimed her across lifetimes. While Celtic bloodlines bore fairy debt, Scandinavian maidens paid a different price, and Seth, their very humanity frozen away in ice palaces that birthed a different kind of monster. Her breath crystallized mid-air as the winter goddess touched her cheek, human warmth draining like water from a broken cup. Scandinavian Cinderella variants emerged from cultures that understood transformation through freezing. In lands where winter killed efficiently and spring brought violent renewal, their Cinderella didn't gain beauty through magic but through thermal death and resurrection. The Snow Queen archetype that would later inspire Hans Christian Andersen began here, with girls who traded human warmth for supernatural perfection. The ritual happened at the winter solstice, when daylight barely existed, and the boundary between life and death grew tissue-thin. Desperate maidens climbed mountains to ice palaces that appeared only in specific conditions, moonless nights, when aurora borealis painted the sky. There, the winter goddess offered transformation, perfect beauty that never aged, power over frost and storm, elevation beyond mortal concerns. The price seemed simple, just warmth. But warmth meant more than temperature. The first person she touched after transformation screamed not from cold but from existential horror. Where human touch created connection, the Ice Maiden's fingers brought void, emotional absolute zero, that drained joy, love, hope from anyone she contacted. She became beautiful but untouchable, powerful but isolated, elevated but fundamentally alone. The transformation process itself involved systematic freezing. First, extremities numbed, fingers, toes, nose tip. Then the cold crept inward, crystallizing blood, turning organs to ice that somehow still functioned. The maiden remained conscious throughout, feeling her humanity retreat before advancing frost. At the critical moment, she had to choose: accept the freezing completely, or die. Those who panicked, who tried to retain some warmth, shattered like glass. Mirror ice showed her what she'd truly become, not metaphorically, but literally. Ice maidens cast no reflection in water, only in frozen surfaces. When she looked in ice mirrors, she saw her true form, a hollow sculpture of frozen beauty, empty inside except for swirling snow. The exterior perfection was just frozen shell around nothing. She'd traded her inner self for outer transformation. Norse stories emphasized the contagious nature of this transformation. Ice maidens unconsciously froze their surroundings. Flowers died at their approach. Water turned solid in cups they touched. Even fire struggled to burn in their presence. Families who took them in found their homes gradually becoming uninhabitable, warmth leaching away no matter how many logs they burned. The ability to survive winter court came with a cost no saga mentioned directly. Ice maidens could dance naked in blizzards, swim in frozen seas, build palaces from snow, but they experienced everything through numbing distance. Joy felt like observing happiness through thick ice. Love became academic concept rather than felt experience. They gained immunity to physical suffering by becoming incapable of genuine feeling. The prince in Norse versions was often another transformed being, a man who'd made similar bargain with winter forces. Their union created dynastic horror. Children born of ice parents emerged wrong, beautiful but predatory, needing human warmth to survive but killing anyone they touched. These ice children became winter spirits themselves, perpetuating cycles of thermal vampirism. Communities developed tests for ice maiden identification. Suspected women had to hold burning coals. The humans showed pain. Ice maidens felt nothing. They had to breathe on mirrors. Human breath fogged. Ice breath froze. Most revealing, they had to laugh genuinely. Ice maidens could perform laughter perfectly but produced no real warmth, no authentic joy. The sound was technically correct, but spiritually empty. The reversal possibility existed, but proved worse than maintaining transformation. If an ice maiden somehow generated genuine warmth, ix blackened, usually through witnessing extreme suffering of loved ones, she melted. Not metaphorically, but literally, dissolving into slush that retained consciousness until fully evaporated. Norse stories included warnings about puddles that whispered, streams that sobbed, morning dew that spelled out regrets. Scandinavian Cinderella traded everything internal for external perfection, becoming monument to beauty rather than living woman. The glass slipper equivalent was shoes of ice that never melted, allowing her to dance on water, walk through fire, stand on air, but each step froze the ground beneath, leaving trail of permanent winter. Her transformation succeeded perfectly and thus failed completely. She became exactly what she sought and discovered it was hollow as wind-carved ice. Northern ice queens knew cold isolation, but Eastern European girls faced something worse. Baba Yaga's test that dissolved the boundary between human and monster in ways that would haunt bloodlines forever. The chicken legs scratched patterns in the dirt that hurt to look at, non-Euclidean geometry made manifest in a witch's dwelling. Slavic Cinderella variants took transformation into realms that violated basic reality. Collected from Russian, Polish, and Czech oral traditions, these stories featured Baba Yaga, the witch whose tests didn't just change bodies but warped the fundamental nature of existence. Her hut, standing on chicken legs, served as transformation chamber where physics obeyed emotion rather than law. Inside Baba Yaga's hut, geography followed emotional rather than physical laws. Corridors stretched when approached with fear, shrank with confidence. Rooms existed only when specific feelings activated them, a chamber of shame that materialized for the guilty, a hall of mirrors that reflected deepest desires. Girls entering to seek transformation found themselves navigating architecture that responded to their psychological states. The skulls on the fence posts whispered names she recognized, previous applicants who'd failed tests, their consciousness trapped in bone, forced to watch new girls attempt what killed them. Each skull maintained personality, memories, desperate need to warn or mislead based on their living nature. Some gave genuine advice, others deliberately sabotaged, creating chorus of contradictory guidance that drove seekers mad. Baba Yaga's tests weren't about completing tasks, but about maintaining identity while reality shifted. She might demand the girl sought poppy seeds from ash, while the rooms cycled through dimensions, one moment in forest clearing, next in underwater cave, then in clouds above mountains. The challenge was continuing to sort while existence itself became unreliable. Many girls simply dissolved, unable to maintain coherent self when environment refused stability. The transformation process in Slavic tradition involved consumption, but not of flesh, of reality itself. Successful applicants had to eat foods that existed in multiple states simultaneously. Bread that was also stone, water that was also fire, meat that was also living animal. Each bite altered their fundamental nature, adding layers of existence that shouldn't coexist. They became quantum beings, existing in multiple states until observed. What emerged wearing her face wasn't what had entered. Witnesses described Baba Yaga's graduates as correctly wrong, everything about them technically accurate but fundamentally alien. They blinked too slowly, breathed at wrong intervals, cast shadows that fell upward. They passed as human, until moments of stress revealed their multiplicity, each AO, hands that existed in several positions simultaneously, faces that showed different expressions to each observer. The Slavic prince wasn't seeking bride but hunting anomaly. Royal bloodlines carried sensitivity to reality violations, making them living detection systems for those transformed by Baba Yaga. The slipper test became a multi-dimensional puzzle, i.e., the shoe existed in several realities, and only someone similarly transformed could wear object that was simultaneously glass, iron, and living flesh. Polish variants emphasized the viral nature of Baba Yaga's transformations. Those who passed her tests didn't just change themselves, they created reality distortions around them. Furniture in their homes developed impossible geometries. Their children were born with abilities to step sideways out of existence. Entire villages reported shared dreams where geography rearranged itself, with Baba Yaga's graduates always at the center of the distortions. Czech storytellers warned that even failing Baba Yaga's tests brought transformation. Those who fled her hut halfway through trials found parts of themselves missing, not physically, but conceptually. They might lose the ability to perceive color blue, or forget what warmth meant, or find themselves unable to comprehend the concept of before. These partial transformations often proved worse than death, leaving people functionally broken in reality. The witch's payment varied, but always involved identity sacrifice. She might demand your ability to lie, leaving you dangerously honest in a world requiring deception. She could take your shadow, marking you as supernatural to anyone observant. Most commonly, she claimed your dreams, leaving you unable to sleep properly, existing in permanent liminal state between waking and sleeping, never fully either. Baba Yaga's hut itself was the ultimate transformation, the Aesher, a structure that existed through pure will, defying physical law through stubborn insistence on its own reality. Those who survived her tests gained similar ability to impose their will on existence, to insist on their own reality until the universe bent to accommodate them. This power made them simultaneously human and other, capable of reshaping world through sheer determination but no longer truly part of it. Each culture added its horror, but they all shared one terrible truth about transformation itself. The process of becoming something else required first, becoming nothing at all. At the moment of transformation, every Cinderella watches herself die, servant girl reaching desperately as the princess emerges from her corpse. Across all variants, hearty prehistoric cannibalism, Italian murder, French psychological warfare, Germanic blood sacrifice, Celtic contracts, Norse freezing, Slavic reality warping, one constant emerges. Transformation requires death of the original self. Not metaphorical death, but literal cessation of who you were, with something else taking your place, wearing your memories like borrowed clothes. Neuroscience reveals disturbing parallels. Brain scans of people undergoing major life transformations, career changes, religious conversions, intensive therapy, show patterns identical to near-death experiences. The same regions activate, the same neural pathways dissolve and reform. The brain literally treats transformation as death event, releasing same chemicals, triggering same responses. What fairy tales encoded symbolically, neurology confirms literally. The moment of change registers as literal death in every version because it is death. The servant girl who enters transformation doesn't emerge, changed. She ceases. Something new forms from her materials, accesses her memories, performs her identity, but the original consciousness ends. Every Cinderella story is ghost story, where the ghost doesn't realize she died. Memory becomes the only survival, not the self but its recordings, played back by new entity that thinks it's continuous with what came before. The transformed Cinderella remembers being servant girl, remembers suffering and dreams, but remembers like watching someone else's home movies. The emotional connection severed, leaving intellectual knowledge without felt experience. What takes her place has her memories, but not her soul. If soul means the continuous thread of consciousness from birth to present, that thread cuts at transformation moment. What continues is new thread, attached to old memories but fundamentally distinct. The princess wearing Cinderella's face is resurrection, not evolution, new being born from old one's death. This explains the uncanny valley effect in every version. Witnesses describe transformed Cinderellas as almost right, triggering primitive recognition that something wearing human shape isn't quite human. The prince's obsessive search makes sense. He's seeking not just a woman but the only other being who's undergone similar death birth, who can understand his own transformation trauma. Traditional cultures encoded warnings about this death. That's why transformations required witnesses. Someone had to remember the original person, maintain external continuity when internal continuity severed. Communities that practiced transformation rituals developed elaborate memory-keeping traditions, songs that preserved pre-transformation identities, ceremonies that honored the dead who walked. The glass slipper represents this death perfectly, a shoe transparent as ghost, rigid as corpse, that fits only the foot that died into specific shape. It's not seeking living flesh but particular corpse form, the exact shape of death moment frozen in crystal. Only the one who died correctly can wear death's souvenir. Brain scans of modern transformation stories show the same pattern across cultures. Whether visualizing superhero origin stories, religious conversions, or makeover shows, human brains process transformation narratives as death-resurrection events. We're hardwired to understand that becoming something new requires ceasing to be something old. Every transformation fantasy is death wish disguised as aspiration. What makes this universal truth so disturbing is its necessity. Growth requires death of earlier stages. The adult exists only because the child ceased. Every morning you wake up as resurrection of yesterday's corpse, similar enough to claim continuity but fundamentally distinct. Cinderella stories simply make visible what happens invisibly constantly, the serial deaths that comprise a life. Modern therapy sometimes triggers this recognition catastrophically. Patients undergoing intensive transformation work occasionally experience what psychiatrists term dissolution panic, sudden awareness that changing means dying. They're not wrong. The person who enters therapy, hoping to transform, literally, cannot be the person who emerges transformed. Success means death of the one seeking success. This ancient pattern of death and rebirth didn't disappear. It evolved into something we practice daily, without recognizing the horror inherent in our constant dying and becoming. The cosmetic surgeon's scalpel traced the same path as the stepsister's knife. In the stepsisters, self-mutilation, rebranded as self-improvement. Contemporary transformation obsession recreates ancient Cinderella horrors with technological precision. Instagram before and after photos document death of former selves as surely as any fairy tale. Each transformation post celebrates a killing. The person in the before, image erased, replaced by after version that occupies their social media accounts wearing their name but fundamentally altered. LinkedIn profiles follow Perrault's Versailles formula exactly. AT. Strategic presentation of edited selves. Careful curation of professional persona that bears minimal relationship to actual human complexity. The glass slipper becomes the impossible job requirement that demands candidates mutilate authentic selves to fit corporate molds. Culture fit evaluations seek those who've successfully killed off inconvenient aspects of identity. Corporate climbing recreates Italian Cinderella's calculated eliminations. Colleagues undermined through whisper campaigns, superiors maneuvered into failures, rivals eliminated through strategic information leaks. Modern organizations recognize and reward the Zazellas, who advance through careful destruction of obstacles. Performance reviews document transformation from human to corporate entity, measuring how thoroughly original self has been suppressed. What we call glow-ups, our ancestors called blood magic, and the blood price remains. Extreme fitness transformations destroy the body that was to create the body that will be. Cosmetic surgery literally cuts away the self that existed. Each procedure removes evidence of the person you were, replacing with manufactured improvements that announce your willingness to suffer for acceptance. Social media serves as modern stone circle witnesses. Transformation requires audience to validate the death of former self. Like prehistoric communities nodding approval at cannibalistic consumption, followers heart and share documentation of identity death. The algorithm rewards successful transformations with visibility, punishes those who retain too much authenticity. The before and after photos hide the same secret as fairy tales. The person in after isn't the person from before grown better. Their replacement wearing the original's name, accessing their memories, but fundamentally distinct. Friends report feeling uncanny valley response to dramatically transformed people. It's still them, but not them, they say, unconsciously recognizing death has occurred. Reality television perfected transformation as public spectacle. Makeover shows recreate every cultural variant: physical mutilation, psychological manipulation, social elevation, through elimination of authentic self. Audiences cheer as participants surrender identity for possibility of elevation. The shows never follow up years later, when the transformed discover what they've lost, when the death of original self haunts the replacement. Dating apps gamify the glass slipper test. Profiles present impossible standards. Demand others contort themselves to fit narrow parameters. Matches occur between mutually transformed beings, edited versions seeking other edited versions, ghosts swiping right on fellow corpses. The authentic self becomes liability, hidden behind filters and careful angles, murdered by curated representation. Modern beauty standards encode blood price explicitly. The pain endured for beauty, from stilettos that destroy feet to surgeries that risk death, it recreates stepsisters' self-mutilation. We've simply medicalized the knife, professionalized the bloodletting, sanitized the suffering into acceptable narratives of self-care and empowerment. Even language reveals ongoing death cult. Reinvent yourself means kill who you are. Become your best self implies current self deserves termination. Transform your life literally means end your life and start another. We speak casually of identity, death, because we've normalized the horror, made routine of what once required ritual. Digital transformation adds new horror, the ability to maintain multiple simultaneous deaths. Each platform demands different version. Each account requires specific performance. Modern humans exist as collection of corpses, each social media profile a different death, a different transformation, a different ghost pretending life. But the darkest truth about Cinderella isn't in any single version. It's in what they all desperately try to hide about the nature of power itself. Every culture that told Cinderella's story added horrors, but they all shared one unspeakable understanding about power. Power requires consuming others. This truth underlies every variant, from prehistoric cannibalism to modern social media. The transformation always demands fuel, and that fuel is always someone else's life force. Whether literally eating mother's flesh, murdering stepmothers, destroying rivals' reputations, or simply occupying space others could fill, elevation requires consumption. The glass slipper reveals this perfectly. It's transparent because power makes visible the blood it stands in. It's rigid because power cannot bend without breaking. It fits only 1 foot because power admits no sharing. The prince seeks not love but recognition of fellow predator, someone who's consumed enough others to match his own appetite. Transformation demands witnesses because power requires acknowledgement of its brutality. The stone circle communities understood. The wretch and everyone must see the consumption, must nod approval, must carry complicity. Modern social media recreates this with every shared transformation post. We witness, we approve, we become accomplices to identity death. The algorithm ensures maximum witness participation. Beauty as violence made visible runs through every telling. The transformed Cinderella is beautiful precisely because she survived violence, inflicted it, endured it, embodied it. Her beauty announces danger, displays capacity for necessary cruelty. The prince recognizes not innocence but killer instinct refined into graceful form. Beauty becomes threat display, warning of what she'll do to maintain position. Lover's possession ritual culminates the horror. The prince doesn't love Cinderella. He recognizes her as successful predator and claims her before she can claim him. The marriage seals mutual destruction pact. They'll consume others together now, raise children who'll continue the pattern. Royal bloodlines exist to concentrate and perpetuate transformation violence. Happy endings as mass delusion complete the system. We tell children these stories end well, that transformation brings joy, that power creates happiness. We watch them internalize the lie, begin planning their own transformations, their own consumptions. The delusion protects itself by making those who recognize it seem crazy, bitter, unsuccessful, failed transformations, who couldn't complete their consumption. Disney's deepest change wasn't removing violence, but making it invisible. The consumption continues. Cinderella still destroys her former self, still eliminates rivals, still transforms through others' suffering. Animation simply hides the blood, makes palatable what should horrify. Children learn to desire transformation without understanding its cost, to crave power without recognizing its source. What modern parents unknowingly teach through Cinderella is that suffering transforms into power if performed correctly. That authentic self must die for successful self to live. That beauty and elevation justify any cruelty. That consumption of others, their time, attention, emotional labor, actual labor, is natural price of advancement. We raise children on cannibalism disguised as princess stories. The one detail every version shares reveals the ultimate truth. Transformation is always traumatic. There's no gentle way to become someone else, no ethical path to power, no bloodless beauty. The story persists because it teaches necessary horror, that success in human society requires willingness to consume and be consumed. Those who refuse this truth fail to transform, remain servants forever. Modern therapeutic culture tries to sell transformation without trauma, growth without death, elevation without consumption. This sanitized version creates worse damage. People attempt transformation without understanding its nature, shocked when they feel themselves dying, horrified when success tastes like blood. At least our ancestors were honest about horror. They knew what princess stories really taught. Which brings us back to that stone circle, where humanity first learned the price of transformation, where honesty about power's nature lived in blood and bone. The drums begin again. The girl swallows the last of her mother's heart. Now we understand what we're witnessing. Not primitive barbarism, but sophisticated honesty about transformation's requirements. Every culture that followed, Italian, French, German, Celtic, Norse, Slavic, Imc, added layers of disguise to this original truth. They hid consumption behind murders, contracts, freezing, trials. But the prehistoric communities knew transformation requires consuming life force, and the most powerful consumption is willing sacrifice from one who loves you. The witnesses nod their approval. They understand what modern audiences cannot. that this girl commits no crime. She fulfills sacred contract, accepts offered power, transforms through love's ultimate expression. Her mother feeds her strength literally, ensuring her elevation through flesh. No fairy godmother waves wands here. No prince arrives to save. The girl saves herself by accepting the horror of what salvation costs. The stone circle contains this truth, holds it in geological memory. Every Cinderella story since tries to encode and simultaneously hide this original honesty. We've spent millennia building elaborate metaphors to disguise what transformation requires, creating magical substitutes for cannibalism, romantic narratives to mask consumption, beauty standards to hide blood prices. But watch modern transformation culture and see the pattern remains. Parents sacrifice themselves for children's advancement, not through flesh but through labor, time, life force drained over decades. Young people consume others through social media, attention, validation, emotional energy devoured in endless scroll. Corporate climbers feast on colleagues' careers. The consumption continues, sanitized but structurally identical. The girl rises from the altar, transformation complete. She wears her mother's strength now, carries her wisdom, embodies her power. The community accepts her elevation because they witnessed its price. No glass slippers here. Her feet remain bare, blood-marked, honest. She needs no prince to validate transformation achieved through sacred consumption. She is complete, terrible, truthful. This is Cinderella's real origin. Not rags to riches but human to hybrid, achieved through consuming offered life. Every version since dilutes this truth, makes it palatable, marketable, safe for children. But beneath Disney animation and Broadway songs, the original pulses, Isisfina, we become by consuming, we rise by others falling, we transform through death. Modern parents who read Cinderella to children continue ancient tradition without knowing. They encode in young minds the pattern of transformation, plant seeds of necessary horror. Children absorb the lesson. To become special requires sacrifice. Advancement demands consumption. Beauty justifies violence. The story survives because the truth survives. Power comes from power taken. Watch any transformation narrative through this lens and see the cannibalism. Every makeover show documents consumption. Every success story hides bodies. Every elevation requires someone else's depression. We've simply learned to hide the bones, to disguise the blood, to pretend transformation happens through magic rather than murder. The next time you hear a child say they want to be like Cinderella, remember, they're asking to consume their old self, to sign contracts in shifting ink, to dance in glass slippers filled with blood. They're volunteering for the oldest magic, the transformation that requires everything, the elevation that comes from eating life itself. And the truly terrifying part? We smile and tell them yes. We buy them princess dresses and glass slippers. We teach them to dream of transformation. We prepare them for consumption, train them to consume, knowing that in our society, those who refuse to transform remain servants forever. Those who won't consume get consumed. The drums fade. The stone circle stands empty. But the ritual continues in every mall, every classroom, every social media feed where transformation gets sold as aspiration. Cinderella lives because we need her. Cinderella lives. Need the story that teaches our children to cannibalize their authentic selves in exchange for power. Need the narrative that makes consumption palatable. We are all Cinderella now, forever transforming, forever consuming, forever dying into new selves that wear our memories but lack our souls. The fairy tale ended long ago. The horror story continues, marketed as magic, sold as dreams, encoded in every transformation narrative that pretends you can become without first ceasing to be. The prehistoric girl who ate her mother's heart was honest. We who hide the same consumption behind therapy and self-help and social media are the true monsters. At least she knew what she swallowed. We pretend the metallic taste in our mouths is anything but blood.